After years of being ignored by my family, they suddenly want me back because my inheritance is worth millions. But I've got a plan to turn the tables on them all. When I was growing up, I always knew I didn't quite fit in with my family. My parents doted on my older brother John, the golden child who could do no wrong. My younger sister Lily was the baby of the family, pampered and adored. And then there was me, stuck in the middle, always trying to prove I was worth something, yet somehow always coming up short. No matter what I did, it was never enough. I didn't follow the traditional path they wanted me to: college, a secure job, settling down in the same town we grew up in. Instead, I pursued my passion for art, something my parents always dismissed as a hobby. They never came to my gallery shows, or even asked about my work. Over the years, the distance between us grew until eventually we stopped talking altogether. It hurt, more than I'd like to admit, but I learned to live with it. I had my art, my friends, and a life I'd built on my own terms. My Aunt Rebecca, my father's sister, was the only one in the family who ever understood me. She was the black sheep herself, having left home at 18 to travel the world and live life on her own terms. We were kindred spirits, and she became my rock when things got tough. But 3 months ago, Aunt Rebecca passed away unexpectedly. It was a gut punch, one that I'm still recovering from. I knew she'd always been well off, but I never imagined the extent of her wealth until the will was read. To my shock, she left everything to me: her properties, investments, and a sizable fortune. The rest of the family got nothing. It didn't take long for them to come crawling back. At first it was subtle. My mother called for the first time in years, acting like nothing had happened and asking how I was doing. My father sent a vague apology email, saying he regretted how things had turned out between us. Even Lily, who hadn't spoken to me since she accused me of being selfish for not coming to her third wedding, reached out with a bubbly message, pretending like we'd been close all along. I'm not going to lie. It was tempting to believe they'd changed. But I knew better. They weren't interested in mending fences out of genuine remorse. They wanted a piece of Aunt Rebecca's fortune. So I decided to play along. I know. It sounds crazy. But hear me out. If they wanted to pretend we were one big happy family again, I was going to give them the performance of a lifetime. What do you think? Like this post, leave a comment, and subscribe if you want to hear the rest of the story, because things are about to get interesting. Anyway, I agreed to meet up with them, and the charade began. My mother immediately invited me to a family dinner, which was really just an excuse to parade me in front of her friends as the prodigal son who had finally come home. John, who'd never had a kind word to say to me in his life, suddenly wanted to grab drinks and catch up. Lily started sending me daily texts, filled with emojis and exclamation points, as if we were besties. They were laying it on thick, and honestly, it was almost entertaining to watch. But what they didn't know was that I had a plan of my own. You see, Aunt Rebecca taught me a lot of things: how to live authentically, how to stand up for myself, and most importantly, how to recognize when people were using me. She once told me that if you give people enough rope, they'll hang themselves with their own greed. So that's exactly what I was going to do. The first step was to make them think they were winning. I played the role of the grateful, eager-to-please child, soaking up their attention and affection. I agreed to their demands, entertained their ridiculous ideas, and let them think they were reeling me in. All the while, I was carefully documenting every lie, every manipulation, and every false promise they made. Because when the time was right, I was going to expose them all. But I'm getting ahead of myself. There's so much more to this story, and believe me, it only gets wilder from here. So stay tuned because you won't want to miss what happens next. The family dinner was the first real test of my resolve. Walking into my parents' house felt like stepping back into a time warp. The walls were still adorned with pictures of John's football trophies and Lily's cheerleading days, while my accomplishments, a couple of art awards from high school, were nowhere to be found. But I swallowed my pride and plastered a smile on my face. Tonight wasn't about me. It was about letting them dig their own graves. The table was set with Mum's best china, the kind she only brought out for special occasions. She fluttered around the kitchen, playing the role of the doting mother, while Dad sat at the head of the table, grumbling about politics as usual. John arrived late, as always, with his wife Karen, a woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere but here. Lily, already 2 glasses of wine in, greeted me with a shrill, "Oh my God, you look amazing!" as if she hadn't told me I looked like a starving artist the last time we'd spoken. "Thanks, Lily." "You too," I lied, glancing at her spray-tanned face. She was already getting tipsy, which meant the evening was bound to get interesting. Once everyone was seated, Mum brought out the roast and the small talk began. They asked me about my life, feigning interest in my art and pretending they cared about the details. John made a big show of talking about his latest business deal, dropping the name of some CEO I was supposed to be impressed by. Lily droned on about her kids, how exhausting it was to be a mother of 3, and how she really needed a vacation. And then, just as the dessert was being served, Dad cleared his throat. "So, we've been thinking," he started, exchanging a glance with Mum, "about the family. We've had our differences, sure, but blood is thicker than water, right?" "Here it comes," I thought, keeping my expression neutral. "We're so glad to have you back," Mum chimed in, her voice sugary sweet. "And we were thinking, now that Rebecca's gone, we should all stick together. Family is what matters most." I nodded slowly, pretending to absorb their words. I agree, family is important. Lily, sensing her moment, leaned in with a conspiratorial smile. "So, what are your plans now? I mean, with everything Aunt Rebecca left you, it must be overwhelming, right?" I let out a sigh as if I were carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. "Yeah, it's a lot to handle. I haven't figured it all out yet." "Well, you know," John interjected, his voice dripping with fake concern. "If you need any help, we're all here for you. We could, pool our resources, make sure everything's managed properly, keep it in the family." "Oh, I wouldn't want to burden you with that," I said, feigning innocence. "Don't be silly," Mum exclaimed. "We're family. We help each other." I pretended to consider this, then nodded. "Okay, maybe we could talk about that. I just want to make sure everything is handled fairly." Their eyes practically gleamed with greed. They thought they had me right where they wanted me, but little did they know I was just getting started. In the weeks that followed, I let them into my life just enough to keep them hooked. John offered to connect me with his financial advisor, who, surprise, surprise, was more interested in finding ways to divert funds into John's own accounts. Lily dropped hints about how much she and her husband were struggling and how they could really use a small loan to tide them over. Even Karen, usually distant and disinterested, tried to get chummy, suggesting we go shopping together so she could help me update my wardrobe, now that I was in the big leagues. I kept playing along, nodding, smiling, and letting them think I was buying into their schemes. All the while I was gathering evidence. I recorded conversations, saved text messages, and documented every attempt they made to manipulate me. Aunt Rebecca's lawyer was in on it too. He helped me set up some creative financial arrangements to test just how far they were willing to go. Then came the day when they crossed the line. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon when John showed up at my apartment, unannounced, with a folder full of documents. "Hey, I was in the neighbourhood," he said casually, as if we both didn't know he lived over an hour away. "I brought some papers for you to sign, just some things to help you get everything sorted." I took the folder, flipping through the pages. It was a mishmash of legal jargon, but the gist was clear. He wanted me to sign over control of the estate to him under the guise of helping me manage it. "John, this is a lot," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this." He put on his most reassuring smile. "Don't worry, I've got your back. It's just paperwork. You don't even have to read it, just trust me." Trust him, after everything. But I did what I always did. I smiled, nodded, and said, "I'll think about it." He left, clearly confident that I was about to hand over my future to him on a silver platter. But what he didn't know was that I had just finished setting the final piece of my plan in motion. That night, I called a family meeting. It was time to pull the rug out from under them, and I couldn't wait to see the looks on their faces when they realised the game was over. Want to know how it all goes down? Like this post, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe, because the next part is going to be explosive. When they arrived at my apartment for the family meeting, they had no idea what was coming. My place had always been too small and bohemian for their tastes, but tonight they were all smiles and compliments. Dad even made a half-hearted joke about how the building had character. I could see the anticipation in their eyes as they took their seats, pretending to care about the art I had on the walls, but their real focus was on what I was about to say. They were expecting me to roll over, to sign away my life's work, and Aunt Rebecca's legacy to them, all under the pretense of family. Once everyone was settled, I stood in front of them, holding the folder John had given me. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I began, glancing around the room, "and I've decided it's time to address some things." Mum nodded encouragingly, Dad leaned forward, and Lily sipped her wine, already looking smug. John gave me a thumbs up, like he was proud of the role he thought he played in making this happen. "I know the past few years have been difficult," I continued, keeping my tone neutral. "We've all had our differences, but I appreciate that you've been reaching out lately. It's made me realize how important family is." There were murmurs of agreement around the room. They thought they had me. "But there's something I need to get off my chest," I said, letting a hint of seriousness creep into my voice. "I've been feeling uneasy about how quickly things have been moving, and I realized I need to make sure we're all on the same page." John's smile faltered slightly, but he quickly recovered. "Of course. We're here for you, whatever you need." I nodded, then placed the folder on the coffee table between us. "John, you asked me to sign these papers, giving you control over Aunt Rebecca's estate, and I've been thinking, why do you think that's necessary?" John shifted in his seat, clearly caught off guard. "Well, just to help you manage everything. It's a lot to handle on your own, and I've got experience with these kinds of things. I just want to make sure you don't get overwhelmed." "Right," I said slowly, watching his discomfort grow. "But here's the thing. I've been handling my life just fine up until now, and I'm pretty sure I can manage Aunt Rebecca's estate too. After all, she left it to me for a reason, don't you think?" The room went quiet. John opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Lily looked at him, then back at me, her smile fading. "I've also noticed," I continued, turning to Lily, "that you've been really interested in my finances lately. You've mentioned your financial struggles a few times, and I can't help but wonder, is that why you've suddenly been so eager to reconnect?" Lily's face turned red, and she set her wineglass down with a shaky hand. "What? No, that's not it at all. I just wanted to make sure you're doing okay." "I see," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "And Mum, Dad, this sudden interest in keeping the family together, was that your idea, or did someone else suggest it?" Mum looked down at her hands while Dad cleared his throat. "We just thought it was time to mend some fences. We've all made mistakes, but we're still family." "Right," I said again, this time with a touch of sarcasm. "Because family is so important to you that you cut me off for years, ignored my achievements, and only came back when there was money on the table." Their silence was deafening. For a moment I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. "I'm not stupid," I said, dropping the pretense altogether. "I know why you're really here. You don't care about me. You care about Aunt Rebecca's money. But what you don't realize is that I've been one step ahead of you this whole time." John finally found his voice, but it was shaky. "What do you mean? We're just trying to help." "Help?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You think you're helping by trying to take everything she left me, by manipulating me into thinking I need you. You've done nothing but prove that the only thing that matters to you is money." The colour drained from Mum's face, and Dad looked away, ashamed. Lily's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine or just another attempt to play the victim. I picked up the folder and held it up for them to see. "These papers you wanted me to sign, I had them reviewed by Aunt Rebecca's lawyer. He told me exactly what they really are, an attempt to strip me of everything. But instead of signing them, I've made a few modifications." I tossed the folder onto the table, and John lunged for it, flipping through the pages in a panic. His face went pale as he realized what I'd done. I had altered the documents, turning them into a binding agreement that would hold them accountable for every false promise they made to me. If they tried to go after the inheritance, they'd be legally bound to give it all up, to charity, to causes Aunt Rebecca and I cared about, and not a single cent would go to them. "What the hell is this?" John shouted, his voice trembling with rage. "It's called karma," I said coldly. "You tried to take advantage of me, and now you're paying the price. If you think I'm going to let you waltz in and take what's mine, you're dead wrong." Lily burst into tears, her sobs echoing in the tense silence. "We're family. You can't do this to us." "You did this to yourselves," I replied, my voice steely. "I'm done being the one who always gives and gets nothing in return. I'm done being your doormat. Aunt Rebecca knew exactly who you were, and so do I. She trusted me to handle her legacy, and I'm going to do just that, without any of you." Mum tried to speak, but her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. Dad just sat there, staring at the floor, his expression one of defeat. As for John, he stood up, shaking with anger. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You think you're so smart, but you'll end up with nothing." I met his gaze, unflinching. "I'd rather have nothing than live under your thumb. Now, if you're done here, I think it's time for you all to leave." There was a moment of stunned silence before John stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Lily and Karen quickly followed, and after a few moments my parents stood up, avoiding my eyes as they left without another word. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was also liberating. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my life, control that no one could take away. I'm sure they'll try to come back, to plead, to manipulate, but I'm ready for them. I'm done playing the role of the lost, desperate child they abandoned. I'm done with all of them. And the best part, Aunt Rebecca would be proud. But it's not over yet. There's still one more chapter to this story. And believe me, it's going to be worth the wait. So stay tuned, because the final act is just around the corner. A week after the explosive family meeting, I found myself standing in front of Aunt Rebecca's old estate, a place I hadn't visited since her passing. The sprawling property was a testament to her unique spirit, filled with eclectic art, lush gardens, and a sense of freedom that I'd always admired. It was where she'd lived her life on her own terms, and now it was mine. But as I stood there taking it all in, I realised something. This wasn't just about the money or the property. It was about the legacy she left behind, and how I wanted to honour it. Aunt Rebecca had always told me to live authentically, to be true to myself, no matter what anyone else thought. And now, more than ever, I understood what she meant. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, I wasn't surprised to see my parents standing there, looking more worn out and defeated than I'd ever seen them. "Can we talk?" Mum asked, her voice trembling. Dad stood beside her, silent but with a look of desperation in his eyes. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded, stepping aside to let them in. We made our way to the living room, where they sat down, their postures slumped with the weight of whatever they were about to say. "We're sorry," Mum began, tears already brimming in her eyes. "We've made so many mistakes, and we know we've hurt you. We were wrong all these years. We were so wrong." Dad finally spoke, his voice rough and strained. "We thought we were doing what was best for the family, but we lost sight of what really mattered. You. We pushed you away, and now we're paying the price." I sat across from them, arms crossed, not entirely sure what to make of this. Was this another attempt at manipulation? Or were they genuinely remorseful? "Why now?" I asked, my voice steady. "Why are you here, apologising after all this time?" Mum wiped at her eyes, looking at me with a rawness I hadn't seen before. "Because we finally realised what we've done, losing you, the way we did. It's been unbearable. And after what happened last week, we've been forced to face the truth, that we've treated you horribly and it's cost us everything." Dad nodded, his expression grave. "We don't expect you to forgive us, and we're not asking for anything. We just want you to know that we're sorry, truly sorry, for everything." I studied their faces, searching for any sign of deceit, but all I saw was genuine regret. It was hard to reconcile this with the people who had dismissed me, belittled me, and only came back into my life when they thought there was something to gain. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the sincerity in their voices. A long silence stretched between us. heavy with unspoken words. Finally, I took a deep breath and spoke. I'm glad you're finally seeing things for what they are, but it's going to take time for me to process all of this. You've hurt me in ways that aren't easy to forgive, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to do that. Mum nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. We understand. We just want you to know that we're here, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. Whether that means giving you space or trying to rebuild our relationship, Dad added quietly. We'll respect whatever you decide. I nodded, appreciating their willingness to accept responsibility, but I still wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to believe that this was a turning point, a moment where we could start fresh, but another part of me couldn't forget the years of pain they'd caused. I need some time to think about it, I finally said, my voice firm but not unkind. I'm not ready to make any decisions right now. They both nodded, understanding in their eyes. Take all the time you need, Mum said softly. We'll be here whenever you're ready. As they left, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Maybe this wasn't the end of our story after all. Maybe there was a chance for healing, for rebuilding, but only time would tell. A few days later, I received a letter from Lily. I hadn't heard from her since the family meeting, and I was surprised she hadn't come with our parents that day. When I opened it, I found a handwritten note, the ink slightly smudged as if she'd cried while writing it. Dear my name, I'm sorry. I've been selfish, immature, and I let my greed get in the way of our relationship. You were always the strong one, the one who followed your heart, and I resented you for that because I didn't have the courage to do the same. I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm working on myself. I'm trying to be a better person, someone Aunt Rebecca would be proud of. Thank you for standing up to us. It made me realise how far off track I've gone, and I'm going to take this time to figure out who I really am. I hope that one day we can talk, not as sisters with a complicated past, but as two people who are trying to do better. With love, Lily. I read the letter twice, feeling a pang of emotion I hadn't expected. Lily had always been the one I had the most complicated relationship with. There was love there, but also so much resentment and hurt. Her letter felt like an olive branch, a tentative step towards reconciliation. But I wasn't ready to respond. Not yet. There was too much to process, too many years of pain that couldn't be undone with a few heartfelt words. Still, I tucked the letter away, thinking that maybe one day I'd be able to look at it without the sting of the past clouding my judgment. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work, channeling all my emotions into my art. Aunt Rebecca's estate became my sanctuary, a place where I could heal and reflect without the weight of my family's expectations. I spent hours in her gardens, finding peace in the same places she had, feeling her presence in every corner of the house. And slowly, I began to feel a sense of clarity. I realised that while I wasn't ready to forgive my family, I didn't want to carry the burden of anger and resentment forever. Aunt Rebecca had always told me that forgiveness wasn't about the other person. It was about freeing yourself from the chains of the past. So, I decided to start with myself. I forgave myself for the years I spent trying to win their approval, for the pain I endured because I thought I wasn't enough. I forgave myself for cutting them out of my life, for the times I doubted my own worth, and in doing so, I began to let go of the bitterness that had weighed me down for so long. As for my family, I knew it would be a long road, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. Maybe one day, I'd be able to let them back into my life, but it would be on my terms, not theirs. I would never again allow myself to be treated as less than I was worth. And maybe, just maybe, they'd come to understand that too. For now, I'm content to live my life the way Aunt Rebecca taught me, authentically, unapologetically, and with the strength to stand up for what I believe in. The past is behind me, and the future is mine to shape, free from the shadows of my family's expectations. Thanks for sticking with me through this journey. It's been a wild ride, but I've come out the other side stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever comes next. Let me know your thoughts, and if you've ever had to deal with family drama, I'd love to hear your stories. Sometimes the best way to heal is by sharing our experiences with others who understand. Take care, everyone. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is living your life on your own terms.